everybody okay if I give my...
Happy Sunday, everybody. We're supposed to start at 6:30, and it's now 7:15. And when I wasn't here the other week and I was waiting for it to come on, I was getting more and more annoyed, knowing about all the chit-chat that goes on behind the scenes. So welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics. I've been out all day. I'm turning into Alex. I've been out all day door knocking because Lara makes me do it these days as well. And I had no idea how hard being in the political party was and how hard they work you. And I'm amazed I ever got elected in the past without knocking on any doors. So I've had a fun day knocking on doors. Hello to Alex, to David, and to Martin. We were going to start off, because this time last week, I'd just come back from Manchester, hadn't I think, and I was a bit delirious, talking about the Gorton and Denton by-election, and we had a result. And perhaps the surprise of the result is that it was a bit of a landslide in favour of the Greens. So Hannah Spencer won with a majority of 4,402 votes, a number which I've memorised. What do we all think about that election result? And we talked last week about whether it have impact on the local scene at all, because this is really a local politics podcast. Do we think it will have any effect locally?
I mean, what it does is it gives a good rub to the Greens, to be fair. So, and that probably will have an impact. Can I ask you a question, Stephen?
Yeah.
When you went up to Gorton and Denton to campaign, is that when you had your Green Party chip installed, which is where the light's coming from?
Well, off-air, David suggested that Lara is in fact the board queen, and I have been assimilated. And I can say that's all true. So yes, it's my microphone, I'm afraid. But yes, I do feel like a bit of a Borg at the moment. So,
yeah, I mean, I have to say, from a personal perspective, there is a thing about incumbent party gets a good hiding in by-election. It's not really a shock, is it? I mean, it was a big turnover and all that stuff. But I mean, it happens all the time. And during the Conservatives' sort of disastrous reign, where they were losing by-election after by-election, some of them were big shocks. Some of them were massive swings as well. A midterm loss is not a massive surprise in my view.
Can I come back on that? So I think the difference is the size of Labour's majority at the last election. Because my recollection is that Labour won by-elections after 1997. So I think that is sort of materially different. I think the other thing is, though, you're right. Usually, you would expect the party of government to not do as well at a by-elections, and there's particular issues at the moment around the unpopularity of the Labour Party and of Keir Starmer. Andy Burnham was talked about as a candidate and then wanted to be a candidate and then didn't happen, which probably magnifies that. But I think there's a couple of things which make it a little bit different. One is there will have been people who voted whose vote was to stop reform, and I guess when people. There's a coordination problem there, and somehow it became obvious that the Greens were the one to go, the party to go for. The as ever, Anthony has an excellent point. Okay, I'm not going to press it. Someone else press it. So that may actually affect how people behave in the stop reform thing. The other thing is that politics is kind of febrile at the moment. It is much less stable than it has been for a while, and in things like that, sentiment and what matters more than it otherwise would, and that I think could mean it ends up actually being rather more consequential.
Yeah, that point Anthony made, I think is really important, though. But I do think it's not the same people turning out. There are a lot of people that probably wouldn't have turned out in the last general election that will have turned out to vote Reform. Vote Reform pick up a lot of people like that don't normally vote. And I suspect what happened is a lot of Labour voters didn't turn out. Obviously, there was a swing towards the Greens, but I also suspect there's a lot of first-time and occasional voters who voted for Reform. That'd be my gut instinct.
Oh, and probably for the Greens as well.
Yeah, I would say there are a lot of first-time voters for the Greens, especially in younger demographics. And like, obviously, I was canvassing there over the weekend. I went a bit. I didn't go to every single area, but it was quite clear you had parts of the constituency where you have a much younger demographic, students, and probably people who usually don't turn out to vote, who are inspired by the Green Party at the moment. And that's something to take into consideration. I also think a lot of people also stayed at home because of some of the negativity in the campaign. When I was there, very interestingly, like when I was actually in Manchester, opening my phone and seeing the ads from different, ads from different parties, which are quite negative. And someone like me, for example, as a voter, if I open my phone and all I hear, where I see is like negative campaign and scare tactics, probably to put me off from voting if I was not that politically involved. And I think this happens to quite a few people, and it tends to be perhaps Labour voters from the general election 24 who saw some of the negative campaigning and thought, you know what, I will just stay at home this time. So I think that also has the kind of tone of campaigning also impact. However, the turnout was high, and I think it was high especially in diverse and young demographics in the constituency, which obviously are more favourable towards the Greens as well.
It really was a toxic campaign as well, though. It was really, I found some of it quite upsetting. Like, it was really bad.
There's another point to make as well, and I'm just going to do a quick plug for my YouTube podcast, which is at Change from the Centre on this, because I did a short on Friday about it, which is about the performance of the Conservative Party, which nobody is talking about or hardly talking about. Was the Conservative Party, or so a number of people said, the Conservative Party's worst ever by-election result.
And then they lost their deposit as well.
Yeah, well, they lost the deposit at the general election as well, to be fair. But, I mean, they dropped from 6% down to 1.9% of the vote. And what's important about that, yes, the Conservatives put virtually no effort into it, and they were never expecting to win. Great. But mid-term, when you're the party of opposition, you would expect to at least be starting to make some progress by now. Maybe not progress, but you would want to be moving forwards, not backwards. And the Conservative Party have to think about that.
Ordinarily, yes, but given this by-election where you had all of these weird, things going on, it's like if you were a Conservative voter, you were either like, well, if I want Reform, I'll vote for Reform, or I really don't like Reform. Who's the best placed person to stop them?
You're right, but there must be that you would still expect there to be people that say, "Well, Kemi Badenoch's doing a better job. Okay, she's not going to win, but I'm still going to vote for her."
Yeah.
And you would expect there to be a growth in that. And I do think Kemi Badenoch's doing a better job, but I just don't think people understand what the Conservative Party are for, and that's really important because if they keep going like that, they are going to die.
So I think there is an issue that she has improved her stuff at PMQs has improved. I don't think PMQs particularly matters. I don't, and she doesn't seem to be getting the cut through in the media, on the news, on the social media web, and all of that.
She is. I mean, part of the problem. I would argue she is based on what I've seen. Okay. And so she did a great press release a few weeks ago, a press release that went through a lot of social media, and she did a press thing, a briefing where she talked about it as well. And there was a couple of things in there that I thought were really important, but they got news coverage. One of the things that was really important is on the YouTube thing that the Conservatives did. She talked about regulation and banning social media for young people. And one of the things she put in there in brackets was, "We are not libertarians." And I thought, out of everything they said, those 4 words were potentially the most important 4 words within there, because that is something that the Jacob Rees-Moggs of this world will absolutely hate.
Yeah, I mean,
Go on, David. Go.
so I was going to say, but I agree with you on that, and there's that libertarian tendency. But I think the Conservatives at the moment come across as spending too much time online.
Hopefully that guy.
Well, he's gone. But I see, for me, social media is important. The things the Conservative Party are not doing is, I'm going to say this a bit bluntly, but the Conservative Party basically have excelled at capturing the older vote. A lot of that has gone to reform, but it's also true that older vote, being blunt about it, are dying, and they're not attracting anybody from the younger generations. And, they need to think about that. I think the big part of it remains the fact that they're a party that lack compassion.
Well, it's interesting on especially some of the older demographic postal vote, because recently here locally, to bring it to local politics, I have seen the postal vote letter from one Robert Jenrick from Reform UK, encouraging postal voters to vote Reform in the local elections coming up for district council elections. I thought that's really, really interesting, because obviously Robert Jenrick is not your local candidate for the district council, but they're using him perhaps to appeal to some Conservative voters, in addition to Farage, as usual.
And Reform have just done something today to say they'll restrict the number of people that are voting by post.
Yeah.
Well, they're targeting postal voters, so probably double standards.
So can I ask you something about the campaign? So one of the things that's been levelled at the Green Party is that they ran a sectarian campaign because they published leaflets and videos specifically in Urdu. Now, when I was in Manchester, and I didn't think twice about this at the time, when we were going out door knocking, we were in a team of about 5 or 6 of us, 5 of us from Cambridge, and they gave us an Urdu speaker to come with us, because sometimes you knock on doors and it's more convenient to talk to people in their local languages. And there are parts of the community who don't speak good English, and I think that's not ideal, but it's a historical thing. I know, one of my friends at school's mother, not school, at work's mother from 10 years ago didn't speak much English, despite having lived here for 10 years, because people live in their own communities and they don't have needs. So it's not an ideal situation. But when I was out posting those leaflets and going out with an Urdu speaker, I didn't think twice about it. I thought, for me, that's good comms. Do you think it's divisive doing that or not?
No. Well, I mean, whether it's divisive or not, yeah, this exactly what I was just going to say. This, right? Okay, I haven't talked about this much, but the 4 years before I stood in Nottingham North, 2006, I think it was, I took part in a thing called the Leicester City Seats Project, which was about putting up candidates and building a team in Leicester to try and grow the Conservative vote in Leicester. Okay, and we were putting out leaflets in Gujarati. And we've always done it. We've always targeted certain groups, and that's half of what these magnificent bits of software that that the political parties use, that tell them what party they think a certain person is likely to support. And all of that is done through profiling, which will look at every aspect of the profile. Obviously, a lot of it comes from the data from Experian, isn't it? That they capture from things like Tesco club cards. But they've always done it. I just don't think it's an issue.
Yeah. So I think I can think of 2 ways that we've done it locally since I joined the Greens. So we have where I live on Winchringham, one of our big social events is the Chinese New Year Lunar Festival. And when I first joined the Greens, we were out delivering leaflets with Cantonese on the leaflets. And again, I thought that was a really nice touch to try and talk to our Chinese community. But in a more fundamental sense, this happened a few years ago, but we had to knock down the trees in Market Square, which is not, it was controversial. We were losing the argument, and Lara wrote some comms for me to put out. And when she did it, she deliberately did it in language which was suitable for an 8-year-old to understand. And I swear that it's the most effective messaging that I ever did, is that people understood it, and read it, and just, basically agreed with me. Yeah, and I think that's because we use simple language. And so even in England, where the average reading age is about 8.5, if you target your comms at the reading age of our British residents sometimes, or overseas residents, it's more effective. And I think part of being an effective politician is being an effective communicator. And so I thought it was thoroughly uncontroversial.
Yeah, I mean, what annoys me about like the kind of whole narrative, especially from coming up from Reform, is that every single party does targeted leaflets, targeted comms when it suits them. Yeah. So obviously, if I'm like door knocking, there's like a Romanian voter. It is, even if they speak English perfectly, it is sometimes easier to explain political concepts and certain things in another language. And I'm not, ashamed about that. If I speak like a few phrases in Romanian and I switch into English and so on, it's not sectarian as such. To do that. What annoys me is like kind of the double standards, because of course some people like accusing this or that party for doing a leaflet in a different language. Well, the same party that does the accusation has done this in many other communities. So you either take a principled stance saying, I'm not doing any comms in any other language, I just speak in English on the doorstep, and I'm not targeting voters based on their ethnic background or language, or you don't. Otherwise, you're just basically preaching something, you're not respecting yourself in your own party.
Remember, Reform are also the party that would stop the families who are about to lose their children and have their children taken into care having the right to a translator. So, it's what you would expect from them, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things here. One about doing leaflets in a different language, fine, not a problem. I mean, many years ago, I ran for general secretary of my students' union. I lost, but I did stuff in a whole load of different languages. No sort of particular issue with that. And so on the doorstep, sometimes it is equal. I have decent Spanish and some Portuguese, and sometimes it's easier to switch into another language. When
it's not, but go on, yeah.
Well, I get that it's if you're trying to get across the particular issue you're having with getting completing a form or whatever, you're going to help people where as you find them there. And I've got no time for where Reform are coming from on this. I think there is an issue with access to English classes and being able to learn English.
Yeah.
Well,
I think there is. Sorry, there is. It is harder to be an effective citizen, and it's harder to stand up for yourself in lots of different ways if you don't have good language skills. And not having English as the first language can be part of that. So there is an issue there. About how do we make integration work? It's just that the way Reform are exploiting it is pretty unpleasant. But then Matt Goodwin was the candidate, so.
Well, yeah. I don't think it mattered who the candidate was. I think Reform would have said what was right for Reform. I think where it becomes difficult, I think, is not translating things into different languages and putting different language leaflets around, doing different languages potentially on social media or whatever. I think the thing where it would become an issue, and I saw no evidence of this in Gorton and Denton or any of the stuff I saw, and I obviously didn't go up there, is if you're saying different things in different languages. If your messaging is different and contradictory, that becomes an issue. But I don't think that's what happened. I just think there were different language versions of leaflets.
I agree, but there's also a thing with political parties putting out contradictory messages in the same bloody language. So,
I mean, there was in the general election the county council elections before last, I think it was. I think the Lib Dems were accused of saying one thing about the route of the East West Rail in one part of Cambridgeshire, and saying something else in another part of Cambridgeshire. And I do think that is that's quite hypocritical, to be fair.
So there's a lovely message about Alex door knocking here.
Yeah,
I wonder if he's
another member of that fan club.
How good is Taylor's Romanian then, Alex? When you knocked on the door.
I mean, to be fair, I think I actually rarely speak on the door in Romanian because I usually open the conversation in English. But I did find it sometimes that it does help because some people can be completely confident and like speak perfect English in the workplace, for the work purposes, for example. But if you don't develop a political vocabulary, it's very difficult. Actually, I have it the other way around, just funny enough, because I obviously left Romania at 18 and I haven't really studied politics. I haven't really, I wasn't really involved in politics there. I actually find it more difficult to express political thoughts and explain what the council does, for example, in Romanian than English. But for most people, it's the other way around, because obviously your vocabulary develops more around your studies and your work and what you do day to day. And if you're not in politics, you're unlikely to have that as much. So it's interesting.
This point that Anthony makes, we're in dangerous straying into different territory here. I agree with Anthony far too much. It's going to change. But he's absolutely right with this. I've been talking about this for a long time. Is about lack of it's further education, lifelong learning. When we talk about the number of times people change profession as adults nowadays and change careers, and yet your ability to train for a different career, through local learning and through further education colleges, or even your ability to learn Spanish, which I'm actually doing at an FE college at the moment, badly. All those things, we've lost, and it's a big issue. We need to start to do what other countries do, which is build lifelong learning and encourage people along the path.
And the point that Anthony will keep on pounding forever is about this lack of civic democracy training in schools, and I really completely agree with him on that. Is there isn't any, even when I was at school, but people don't know how local government works, how government works, and why voting is important. And I think that's really, really critical. So combining those two things, I think, would be really helpful.
Yeah, they used to do some part of there was citizenship within schools, wasn't there? And I don't know if they still do it. And I should know because obviously my son's a teacher and my wife works in a secondary school. Because I went in and talked citizenship and talked about politics into Harry Smith's a few times.
So this question here from Martin: would Reform object to a two-sided leaflet, English on one side and translation on the other? The answer is probably.
Unless they did it.
Yeah, that's the key point, because this only became an issue, and Farage only came out with the headline of like only British people should be allowed to vote in any elections and so on after they lost the by-election. Yeah, so I bet that if they actually won the by-election, they wouldn't have come out with that headline. It's a post-event justification of your loss, which is obviously very divisive as well.
The stuff they put out today, they put it under they put it under voting reform. And it's not voting reform. Absolutely, all it is it's them playing to their own audience, basically, and it's and that's it. It's them. It's sour grapes. It's not about genuine voting reform. Genuine voting reform is about moving towards proportional representation, which would solve a lot of these problems.
Sorry. So I wanted to just something though about postal vote. So. With postal voting, I mean, for a long time I've been quite gung ho in favour of postal voting, but somewhat less so now, because there is, even if Reform have come up with this thing about family voting, no idea what the truth of it is, but there needs to be confidence in electoral systems as well. And it's a bit risky, because you can end up, you sort of give ground, by doing that and saying, everyone has to be confident in everything. But I think there is a legitimate question around the potential, there being more potential for abuse or coercion, or I'll just help you fill it out with postal votes. So the rules have tightened up a lot on political parties, being able to get involved in that process, which is good. One of the things I think that's being trialled in Cambridge, and I suspect Anthony will be able to to sort of say if I've got that right, is having polling stations, a number of polling stations open for longer, which is I think is a really, really good idea.
That includes before the election. There's days before the election.
Yeah, that's right.
You can go in to vote, isn't it? Which I think
I would like to see weekend voting, to be honest.
Yeah, same. I think it'll be more effective, probably.
I think what a lot of countries do in Europe, and I think it's one of those things where, you know, yes, some people work weekends and everything else, but actually, if you introduce, you know, most people are free weekends, at least on Saturday or Sunday. And so there's no excuse about, because there are a lot of people that don't vote because they think they're going to vote at the end of the day. Then when they get home after a hard day, they go, "Oh, I just can't be bothered." Yeah. So just do something at the weekend or whatever. I think would make a lot of sense.
I agree very much on that. But as I said, the way it's being done is that there are a few places in Cambridge that will be open, but there'll be like city centre places where you could go in and vote when you happen to be in town anyway, to go and vote. And it also means that you can make sure all of the those polling stations are properly accessible and so on. And you've got if there are people who are partially sighted or whatever, there's stuff in place to help them. I just think it's I think in Australia they do it, and in some places I think the polling station can be open for something like 2 weeks beforehand, because if you're in the middle of nowhere in Australia, you might only go to a settlement once every if you're in the outback somewhere.
But also bear in mind that Australia has compulsory voting as well, so you're not allowed not to vote. And I've got a friend of mine who's Australian, funnily enough, lives out in Berlin, but he's of the view that it's a great thing because it gets more people talking about and interested in politics, because they can't just ignore politics, because at some point they've got to go out and put a cross in a box.
Yeah.
All right, shall we move on to local politics? And I feel like we should have some sort of jingle for this. But this is our weekly edition of Defection.
Yeah, the jingle this week is like more defections.
More defections. Yeah. And this week's defections, surprise, surprise, and we still haven't resolved whether independents can defect. But two of the remaining, there's so few independents left. So 4 years ago, I think we had 15 independents elected onto Huntingdonshire District Council. And between them, lots of them have defected or joined political parties, including me. So I can't get on my high horse about this one. Lots of them are not standing again, I think, although that remains to be seen. But one of the more prominent independents in the county and the district council is Tom Sanderson and his partner, Anne Blackwell, and they have announced this week that they're joining the Lib Dems, which by my money leaves almost the only person left who I think is a genuine, real independent who'd probably be standing, as far as I know, is Julie Kerr, who is a fantastic independent who I really love and did a fantastic job in the local government debate at County Council by voting against her administration. So I'm all proud of her for that. What do we think about Tom joining the Lib Dems?
I just don't think it's a surprise, to be honest. That's all. I don't. It's. I think it's his. If you count independent as a party, I think it's his third different party over the years, and you wonder about that sometimes. But he's perfectly entitled to do it, and I think a lot of us would say this has been coming for a few years.
Yeah,
and I like Tom. I've known Tom a long time. He was chairman of Huntingdon Town Council the same year I was chairman of Whittlesey. He was mayor of Huntingdon the same year I was chairman of Whittlesey Town Council.
Don't think he's ever been the mayor of Huntingdon. Maybe deputy mayor.
So could he have been chairman of the district then? I don't
know. He's vice chair of county at the moment. But
this was a long time ago. Almost before you were born, Stephen.
He's certainly not chair of district because I know his photo on the wall in Pathfinder, so he's not on there. So perhaps he has, but he's been around. He is one of the longest serving people in local politics. I can't get on my high horse about this, having recently joined a party myself. My issue with this is that when we had 15 independents, so 2 years ago, the independent group split in two, to a group led by Tom and a group led by me. And part of the reason that happened is because we wanted to elect our own leader, and we never voted for Tom to be leader. He was just the leader from the start. And this is a problem with being independent. And one of the reasons why I have joined the party is we didn't have a constitution. We had no way of organising elections. We had no way of forcing a leadership election. Because my feeling at the time was that when we signed a joint administration agreement, that it was for 4 years. But after 2, we agreed that Sarah would be the leader for 2 years. Absolutely right, because she was much more experienced than us. But then we were going to have a discussion after 2 years, and we never really had that discussion. And personally, and I think that kind of glad it hasn't happened, because I think Sarah's done a fantastic job, especially over the last year. Yeah, with local government stuff, I think she's been fantastic. But we had an opportunity for an independent to lead the district council. I don't think that would have been Tom. I don't think he had that ambition. It might have been me. But we could never sort it out, and the independents kind of fell apart 2 years ago. And what we're seeing later now is some of that aftermath. And at the time, some of the stories floating around by Tom, who'd been photographed in a yellow rosette, was that Tom was actually a Liberal Democrat. And so, he wasn't, I don't suppose, but still, like, I kind of, not that I like Tom a lot as a person, but I think that part of the reason why the independent movement failed was because we couldn't elect our own leader, and perhaps Tom might have been overly loyal to Lib Dems. So Laura and I are going to do a podcast about this, and I'm going to spill all the beans. But that's my only personal disappointment, because I think we could have achieved more, and maybe the whole independent thing might have gone on for longer if we had the ability to elect our own leaders.
The opposite could have happened as well, which is you could have seen your independent group fall apart over something like that as well.
Which is what happened. Like Bigglesworth, in Central Beds down the road, they did elect an independent group to lead them, and it's also true that they've split in half as well. They haven't passed their budget,
it's often true. I've seen across the country, these ex first groups, appear in different places, do very well, go to power, and when they go to power, they absolutely fall apart, because it's like making decisions is always like herding cats. I believe. Sorry, just to answer Anthony's comment, which he's just put up there. I believe Tom was a conservative before.
He was.
He was.
Yeah.
On this, I'm not surprised.
I'm sorry, can I just say, John Hipkin, by the way, John Hipkin was leader of the independent group when I was when I was leader of the county council, and John was a great guy, and lots of time for him.
So on the defections or joining parties, I'm not surprised. And obviously Tom supported over the years different candidates that he wanted to support locally or nationally. As an independent, that's perfectly fine to do. As an independent councillor, supporting and canvassing for different parties or delivering leaflets and so on. But I think when I realized this is coming is when he decided to join the Lib Dems on county in the administration, because there's pretty much no reason in my view to do so unless you quite like their policies, because they already have a majority of one. You can be in opposition. You can actually be a bit. I mean, there are obviously reasons, pros and cons. He's vice chairman of the council right now and so on. But I think politically, to me, that's not a good enough reason to.
No, I thought it was odd as well. I really thought it was. I was surprised by it, and as an independent, I in his shoes, if I had been involved, I wouldn't have done that then.
Yeah,
I did it in the previous administration when we were we're trying to get a majority, so that was different.
Yeah, because it's a choice to get a majority against the opposition.
But I wouldn't have done
we
it.
already have a majority, so.
And I found that odd as well, and maybe a bit disingenuous. And I don't think Julie Kerr felt very comfortable with it, and she ended up voting. I mean, it was done for the purposes of LGR, as I understand it, and they were whipped into voting for the LGR option A, which has been unpopular. Julie didn't vote for it, and then has been disciplined subsequently and kicked off committees and things. So it's kind of all a bit weird. But maybe
it was for LGR or like budget, or obviously it's a very slim majority, but I still think you can still have an agreement where you vote to the things that you agree. You don't have to be part of the administration. You can just have a sort of agreement where you can say, okay, we'll support you on budget or on things we actually agree with, and you don't have to be part of everything.
I think it's, of course,
I
possible that
agree. I think LGR is one of those issues where you could easily justify just not having a whip on how you vote, which is how a lot of places did it. Because you can understand how easy it is not just to agree or disagree with LGR, but to have a different view to about what's the best option for you.
And we have the fact that Tom voted for option A at County Council, and then seconded the motion, I think, at Cabinet for option E at District Council, and I just find that personally odd. Like, well, your mind can change, obviously, but on something.
So I think a couple things.
But also, just to say, and just to stick up for Tom in this, at District Council, you're voting for what you think is the best option for the district, and at County Council, you're voting for what is the best option at county. So I sort of can see it. Although, I can also see how that can look to others as well.
David?
So that's the point I was going to make, actually. And there's one of the problems with getting, councillors to vote. Are you voting in the interests of the ward, the interests of the authority you're on, or the interests of the whole area, or and so on?
And there's also a big issue about long-term versus short-term as well. And I think some of that is getting missed in the debate about everybody not wanting to be part of Peterborough, because people look at Peterborough where it is, and more, I think, where it has been in recent years, and they see that as a reason not to become part of Peterborough. But for me, there's an opportunity to fix that, turn Peterborough into a great local authority, and move from there. And I think that's the long-term view, and that's where I sit.
I have to say I'm not against option B, although option A is much better. I'm just against splitting Huntingdonshire on weird boundaries that don't make sense to local people. But I think there's a point. I think option B has a lot of.
I'm in favour of splitting Huntingdonshire, but not along the river.
Yeah, exactly. But that's option not on the table.
I am in favour of splitting the north of Huntingdonshire against the south, just because there's such a close affiliation between places like Yaxley and Peterborough.
I was trying to during the council meeting, I was trying to get the God Manchester district councillors to vote for option B to free us all from tyranny of Huntingdon, but they didn't, thankfully, and so we all backed option A, which is my favoured choice. Well, good luck to Tom in his new political party. It leaves the Lib Dems in a very strong place, doesn't it? They've picked up Michael Burke, Kath Gledow, Sally Howe, Tom now, and so they picked up 5 new councillors. Whether those councillors keep their seats after the election, we don't know, but it does leave the Lib Dems looking very strong.
Just a couple of things. One is, I think Tom has probably worked quite closely with the Lib Dems, over the past few years at county and district, which may be why he's joined. But also, Tom, he's on the town council with me, and obviously is triple hatted. And he's we've disagreed on a few things once or twice, but he does get a lot. He does get a lot done, and he's I think having him, it's a bit of a result for the Lib Dems to get him.
Yeah, and he's certainly a great ward councillor as well, and he's very very popular where he is, and so very experienced.
I just want to answer this question from Anthony, because we strayed into this territory, because I think it is from my perspective. I think that it will be very, very quickly that we have a review of the boundaries. As soon as we've got LGR sorted out, I think they'll do another review of it based on all sorts of issues, but one of which is that we actually need a deeper look at it. And I think ideally, when we've done it this time, there should have been some sort of commission to come up with boundaries and stuff like that. I just don't think the government had the choice, if they were going to do it, then do it in any way other than the way they've done it, because it had got to the next general election and then it would have just become election fodder, and would have been got rid of. So I think fairly quickly, what I'd like to see is a review of local government boundaries. Because we're and a review of local government, because we're going to introduce regional council, regional assemblies, but that won't happen.
Well, and that's part cooked in almost to the businessy the option E business case is, it doesn't say it explicitly, but the potential for future boundary reviews because of the whole Thamesford issue, which is just down the road. It's going to be a massive settlement. It makes option E much more viable if that new Thamesford development and Great Barford end up in Huntingdonshire. Almost we have the population to make us that size of unitary. So I think that's quite interesting.
You can make,
now we see with both Bedford Borough Council and Central Beds Council
and you can make
financially.
You could make the same arguments about Thamesford and as I've made about Yaxley, to be fair.
Yeah, or it could be that maybe St Neots moved into one of the Bedfordshire councils, which I'm not completely opposed to, because I think for St Neots the Thamesford question and Great Barford, Little Barford question is almost as important as the LGR question, because it's going to be strange if it's split between two. So I'm not averse to any of those options. I'd like to see Thamesford come into Huntingdonshire. It's not something we get to decide, but I think it would greatly enhance the business case for option E. Can I quickly take this question as a Little Paxton district councillor? So Paxfest, if you've never been, is the annual Little Paxton. Well, it's like a village fete on steroids, and it's really, really cool. No, but they should do. But it's like a village fete, but it's quite a big one, and they always have an annual dog show. And this year, the dog show it's difficult to imagine sitting in February, but the dog show got cancelled because of welfare concerns about having a dog show. Dog shows are a critical part of it in the summer, and so Adam's asking, have they looked at reviewing the well-being of dogs? The answer is, I'm a Little Paxton district councillor. I try to go to the parish council meetings, but quite often they end up on the same night as HDC meetings. So I don't know for sure, but I'm quite friendly with Richard Tomlinson, who is the chair of Little Paxton Parish Council. And so I'll ask Richard and get back to you maybe next week about what's happening with Paxfest, because it is a really good question, because people are concerned about
the Huntingdon Carnival has had the same issues, which is that with the dog show being cancelled in hot weather.
This is proper local politics. This
it really is village fate, but local politics. But so Adam, if you give me a week, I'll have a chat with Richard, who will happily tell me, and we'll get back to you. I'm sure it's something that they've taken very seriously, because it was quite a controversial issue in our local villages. Can we just let's quick see what Anthony's like dominating the conversation as usual tonight.
Yeah, well, you say it's an unknown. It's not an unknown, is it? We know that the Greens are on the growth. Greens are growing, and my only thing is that some of that vote up in I know we're changing back to that topic, but some of that vote up in Gorton and Denton is a protest vote, and you can see that by the fact that the protest vote was going somewhere that it doesn't normally, because in the past the protest vote has always gone to the Lib Dems. And they did dreadfully as well, and the Lib Dems have got some thinking to do as well.
Yes, yeah. So I think it has. I mean, I'm biased, but I think even door knocking today, it does. People are seeing us now as a credible alternative, especially when reform are concerned. But I think what will really change the political landscape around here and everywhere is if the voting age moves to 16. Because in that cohort, lots of those younger voters, well, certainly there are not many reform voters in that cohort, but there are a heavily biased towards the parties of the left, and I would argue particularly the Green Party. So I think that will change voting demographics.
I strongly suspect the Labour Party and the Labour government might change its mind over 16-year-old voting. Is the reality.
Sorry.
Go on, David.
No, I was going to say, I think people are assuming too much about votes at 16 changing things much. I think you've got to look at propensity to vote as well.
It definitely loads things against the Conservatives. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Yeah, no, I would agree. And reform. There's no two ways about it, and I don't have a problem with that, because the Conservatives especially, I don't particularly care about reform, but the Conservatives especially need to wake up and realise that actually, they're doing the party and they're doing the country a massive disservice by just trying to kowtow to the older vote. And from that perspective, 16 to 18-year-old voting just doesn't bother me at all, and it only weighs against the Conservatives because the Conservatives can't do anything for younger people.
So again, let's talking about the green wave again, and this is a good point as well. Is that it does require extra scrutiny when you've got the Greens website crashed this week because after Gorton and Denton, a number of people trying to join, and it requires extra scrutiny because if you're not careful, you get people who are dodgy candidates. And I do know for a fact, so I just mentioned Richard Tomlinson, who's the chair of Little Paxton Parish Council. He's also a prominent local Conservative. And when he heard I was joining the Greens, he messaged Lara to say that your scrutineering can't be very good if you've let him in. So it's true.
To be fair, good point.
If you're not careful, you can get all sorts of dodgy people involved. And let's quickly deal with this. Loads of comments tonight, so thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean so hopefully, I mean if we do get the vote, or when we do get the vote for 16-year-olds, which I am completely in favour of, independent of any political effects, hopefully those political parties will start looking at the needs of those communities or those people, demographics. Yeah,
to say to Martin, I think that's the point I was trying to make. You've just made it better than me.
Yeah. No, so that I mean that's a good reason for doing it, and there is the feeling with triple lock and everything. Lots of because older people tend to vote more. Lots of policy choices are aimed at those generations.
Oh, and you can sit and look at it, and as a younger person, I'm not saying I'm a younger person, by the way. As a younger person, you can sit and look at the impact of it. Over recent years, you look at the pensions triple lock as an example of something that's gone and weighed massively in favour of the older vote. But you then look down at younger people and you see things like student debt and the way student debt's been manipulated against them. You look at the fact that young people now and the ability of younger people to get on the housing ladder has virtually disappeared, and you can sort of see how this propensity for older people to vote has benefited them hugely, and you could argue at the expense of younger people, and that's something that our political system has to look at.
Well, there's no doubt it shapes policy.
There's a huge part of that. Go on, sorry, Alex.
Yeah, I was going to give an example actually from Gorton and Denton. There's been a lot of articles around immigration reform and the impact on that election. And that's a classic example of doing policy thinking. Most people impacted by that policy won't be able to vote anyway, so who cares? However, many people do care because everyone actually knows someone impacted, or people who are like me, British citizens, now have been through the process. So even if certain things don't impact me directly, I can still think, actually, I was in that space 5 years ago. It would have impacted me if I was, in that part of my life. And I think it was really interesting. The first conversation I had in Gorton was this man who was a British citizen a few years ago, became British, and he said the reason why he is thinking of voting Green instead of Labour, lifelong Labour voter, is because of the earned settlement reforms about people, people that he knows from his workplace having to wait now 10 plus years rather than 5 to be settled in the country, and how he, as someone who was settled in 5 years, like I have, by the way, and became British, how he felt if he had this opportunity, it would be unfair for his colleagues not to have the same. And we had a conversation around that, but I think that was the first time when this came up on the doorstep in such a way that it doesn't really come up, when I'm canvassing in St. Ives as much. Obviously, it's a very diverse constituency, and I think that's exactly one of those policy areas when you think, most people can't vote, we can just do what we think is right or what we think the polling shows, whatever, without necessarily thinking about the fact that there are millions of Commonwealth voters who have the right to vote in every single election, including general elections, and obviously the people who are already British many of them not from a migrant background who have friends or family members who are in that situation. And I think we kind of underestimate how much the electoral impact can be, especially for Commonwealth citizens who are probably most affected around, especially people working in social care, for example, who would be probably most impacted by those reforms. So it's very interesting.
On that, the other one to add in is dual nationals. Because there's been stuff about dual nationals as well, and I think the whole debate, obviously, around immigration and so on is awful in so many ways. But if, just going back to your point about 20 years, if the whole complaint that people have is about integration, making people wait for 20 years and not have that certainty is a really
an anti-integration measure. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the real concerns I have is the Home Secretary's come out and said we're going to keep the immigration policies that we've got, or that she's putting through. I do wonder, and I'm sorry, we'll get back onto local politics, but also this affects social care and so on. Yeah. What does this do to, we've seen that the sort of applications for skilled visas are through the floor, and and so on. That particularly affects social care and so on. And I do wonder if at some point we're going to realise, actually the whole, the insanity of the current debate on immigration, we're going to realise actually it's bit us in the posterior. So that wasn't a very elegant way of saying it. But I'm sure
it's more elegant than I would have put it. But so go on, Alex.
I was going to say, I think that's exactly about the narrative. I think a lot of people do care about integration. I think there's a lot we can do, including what we spoke about before, like access to English classes and like more integration measures, a more positive vision around citizenship and so on. I think I'm not saying that there's no reform to be made in the system. However, no one really cares if a nurse settles in like 5 years or 20 years. And I think that's where a lot of people care. That's like perceived as an unfair system, especially when it's applied retrospectively. And the idea that someone like already is in the UK and kind of retrospectively like the goalpost moves, I think for a lot of British people, like that's like an unfair thing. And I think that it really came across on the doorstep. And I think it is not surprising that in a very diverse constituency that actually comes up quite a lot.
But there's a One Nationist, okay, and the thing I talk about within One Nation a lot is about creating aspiration amongst younger people, but also amongst disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged individuals. And if you want to do that, if you want to create this, the desire to do better for yourself and the belief that you can do better to yourself with people, delaying the point at which a migrant can become a British citizen just gets absolutely 100% full square in the middle of that. Mm-hmm. If you don't know that you've got a future beyond 5 years in the country in which you're living, that is going to absolutely kill your aspiration.
There's no incentive to integrate as well. There's no incentive. I think it affects also job progression, and actually like it affects, therefore has economic impact, because if you don't know what happens in 5 years, would you invest in like taking another course or like maybe like learning something or progressing in your workplace? No, you probably stay in the same job because you think I have to wait and see. Like I'm not secure about my status. Like why would I invest my time? I don't know, getting a degree or getting something else or progressing in my job.
You get into a job where you're, let's say, I'll give you an example because this used to happen a lot in the MOD. You're a junior clerk and you know an admin officer or whatever, within the civil service. You've been in the civil service for 2 years, I think it is, and you can apply to do a part civil service funded open university degree. So you join the civil service after you've been in this country for a year, and you then 2 years later, you're 3 years into it, and you know that you can't apply to be a British citizen for another 7 years. Why would you apply to do an open university degree? To better yourself, but also to better the country you live in, because you're better qualified and able to progress.
It's really frustrating.
Shall we move on? Because I'm aware now that we promised 3 things in in
Yeah,
the
we should do
title
an
of this podcast.
immigration special.
We've done about six.
Yeah, we should do, and we haven't dealt with any of them. But before we do, there is a really important question, which is why were the Greens using a wooden spatula as a microphone in a video on Stephen's social media? This was, again, right, I have no control over this. This was a Lara idea. So what we use these microphones, these MX microphones, which are square, but I think amongst the YouTuber community,
Cool. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Amongst the YouTuber community, there is a thing of people using spatulas and egg whisks and toilet brushes as like impromptu handles for these microphones. And so in future videos, we will be, I'm not sure we're going to use a toilet brush handle because that seems disgusting. But in general, we might be looking for other things. So I think we've done a Lunar New Year video where we use some dragon thing. So
I'm going to say this. I'm going to continue using a microphone as a microphone.
It is a microphone, but it just gives you a good handle. That means you can thrust it into unsuspected people's faces. So thank you. And I tell you what, if you liked our videos and you thought that Laura's and I's videos are brilliant, you need to go onto David's councillor page and check out the video that David has done on LGR, which I've done before, is the best local politics video I've ever seen. I just messaged Laura saying, well, we thought we were good, but we need to up our game because David's video, the production values are excellent. It's a brilliant, brilliant explanation of the whole topic. And you should definitely do it. Maybe can you post a link to it, David, in the comments?
Yeah, put in the comments. Yeah, I do agree, Stephen. I think it's a brilliant edit. It's like a lot more. I usually spend 10 minutes editing my video, so I think like whenever I will have like a lot of time to edit, maybe I'll do something.
I've been working it since November, so
I'm really trying to up my game in this area at the moment. I'm dreadful at it, and I struggle to find the time. So I'm trying to do things in one take, except what I'm doing them is in 20 takes. And
so on that one of the so I'd not done. I usually do a video every week. I'd not done one for a little while, and I thought, I said I've had this on the back burner for a while. I thought, right, I'm gonna do it now. Now I've got the time and whatever. And Alice, my wife, sort of was the camera operator for me. So thank you, Alice. One of the with my, see, I'm doing it now. My weekly videos tend to be a bit long and a bit wordy and a bit rambly. So I was deliberately going for something that was just more interesting to watch than me going, well, yeah, and all of that sort of stuff. So that was part of where the idea came from, and then just picking one topic rather than things I've done this week, and it is important, and I hope I've sort of got across some of the sort of the background to this and where it's coming from and so on. It's surprisingly difficult to, or I found it difficult to do, getting across, or something that can be actually quite dry in a way that is sort of visually interesting and keeps people engaged and informed, which is why I ended up doing the jumping around, doing different scenes in different places. But also there's a few cuts in there of some of the absurdities of local government, and I went for ones that hopefully work visually. There was so there were so many others that I could have put in. And I think hopefully that gets across. I have my views, as people know, on the particular way that the LGR is being done, but hopefully it gets across the why some sort of reform to the structure of local government is needed, is a good thing. Also, I hope some of the challenges. I've had this as like, why can't you do anything about X issue? And it's like, okay, I'm around and I'm loud and vocal and I look a particular way, and all the rest of it, and so people assume I can do things. And it's actually I'm a parish councillor, town councillor, but it's the same thing, and that I'm quite often quite limited in what I can do, and it takes a little time to do everything because the system is so unwieldy.
Okay, so thank you for that. It's brilliant, David, and it's really good.
Well,
and we hope that everybody watches it. Now, we've got 1 minute left to talk about the three things we're going to talk about. Actually, we can go for a bit longer. They're talking about brilliant local campaigners who also have a good video game. The Hunted MP, Ben, a BCJecty, also wrote a letter this week, and I think did some videos about potholes. Anybody want to talk about that?
So it's interesting because this is one where he gets lots of people contacting him about potholes, and you understand why. He's visible. He's the MP, and it's part of the problem we have with MPs being sort of super councillors.
Yep.
You know, that which you understand why it happens, that okay, they can get things done, they can poke, and so on. You understand what happens. That's not really their role, and it shows sort of the problems with sort of the structures of the state as we have them. So I can understand his frustration and saying, look, okay, this is something for the county council, which it is. The issue is that fundamentally this is something about funding. There may be particular operational issues in particular places and so on, but this is something that's true across the country, because essentially this is local government hasn't been funded properly or has had large cuts to its revenue. The money it gets from central government, I think the central grant in spending power terms went down something like 40%. And the result is, when you've got things that you have to do legally and morally, like looked after children, adult social care, is that the roads aren't going to be maintained as well. I think there may be particular problems with particular companies that maintain roads, or so I'm given to believe. I don't know a huge amount about it, and or it's been suggested to me about councils not checking up on whether the work is done properly, which also suggests a problem with the the sort of relationship between the contractor and the client, the county council, or whoever it happens to be, if people are just getting away with shoddy work. But like I said, I do think a lot of it is the money issue, and the county council is very limited in what it can do.
Sorry, go on, David.
No, all I was going to say is it's.
Yeah.
I was going to finish with saying this thing that people assume that councils are paid for by council tax, when council tax is only part of it. So same people still talk about road tax. It's not road tax, it's vehicle excise duty, and it just goes into the consolidated fund. And going back to our previous point, I tried to get that across, and I think it sounds like I'm making excuses when I'm trying to explain the situation. It's difficult.
I mean, there's a lot of that I agree with. Absolutely, the problem with potholes fundamentally is down to the fact that a lot of the council's highways work is not statutory, and yet it's work with looked after children, as an example. It's work with SEND, and it's work with adult social care is statutory. So those are things they have to do, and for good reason. And I agree with that. I would say, in defence of Ben, he doesn't do, from what I see, and I do look at his stuff. I have a good look at it once a week on his content on X, as an example, and he doesn't do much of this super councillor stuff. A lot of his content, a lot of his promotion is about, and the vast majority is about parliamentary issues, and that's not true of many MPs.
Well, he's also super active in Parliament, isn't he, in terms of asking questions,
absolutely,
speaking in debate.
I think that's true. There's a lot of pressure for many MPs to be super councillors, because it's also perceived in a multi-party system now in some constituencies as the only way to win, by having incumbency effect, by sorting out a million cases, by actually doing a lot of work. But also then I think it's very difficult then for the public to also navigate different responsibilities, because yes, it's true to say is the county council delivering the work, but then it's not really Alex Beckett himself. It's obviously the contract, the highways contract. Of course, Alex Beckett as chair of highways is responsible for the budget discussions and the implications on the budget on highways. So it's kind of obviously it is in a way shifting blame on someone else, but it's true that he's not responsible himself. In that sense.
I mean, just to give you an example, okay, some of you may know, and this is really, really important and deserves a big cheer, but Kingsdyke Bridge reopened yesterday,
Yay.
Okay, I mean, the fact that they reopened it and then put some roadworks about 20 yards down the road for the day yesterday, wasn't 20 yards, and caused chaos is another matter, but it's running lovely today. Steve Barclay put a video out, who's the MP for that area, put a video out on social media, which was very cleverly worded, but effectively took some of the credit for the fact that the bridge reopened yesterday. Now, that is an MP acting as a super councillor and also taking credit for something that, you know, he may have written a few letters, he may have done that, but fundamentally, he didn't accelerate the reopening of that bridge. And he sort of, without doing so, I think is the way I'd put it, cleverly tries to take credit for some of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite it's quite common. But on the other hand, I don't think there's anything wrong for like an MP, because if the residents actually contact you and say like, this is the main issue in my area, or that's what, it's your role as well to represent that issue. So I think it's not wrong for like Steve Barker or anyone else to raise the issue.
It's a shame actually, because when Steve gets into his role where he really is good at getting deep into scrutinizing issues and challenging issues and stuff at Parliament, he's been fantastic. That's how he ended up as a minister, because of the work, some great work that he did on the Public Accounts Committee. And you know, if he focused more on that sort of stuff, I think well, first of all, he'd make Parliament a much better place, but just get him out of local government.
Yeah, we all feed that system as well, though, because as councillors, when we run out of options, we tend to force things towards the MP as well, and sometimes asking question in Parliament or raising it in Parliament is all we can do. So I think, you know, we're part of that system, and genuinely, I appreciate their support when it comes. And so stuff like that bridge, if Steve's had any influence at all, then it's good, isn't it? I think we need to stop being the Benabisi Jekti fan club, because he beat our mate Alex in the general election.
I'm not in the fan club. I'm very sorry, Steve.
I know, but I mean, do you know what? Neither am I completely, but he does in terms of his PR, he's probably facing.
No, I mean, he's active. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So,
and compared to his predecessor, I mean, it was a pretty low bar, but he does a great job. Right. Pause the plan. So we had our budget meeting at Huntingdonshire District Council this week, and quite rarely, I can't think of another time at HDC when we've seen a petition. And HDC's constitution is so rusty, we never quite know how to deal with these things. So quite often what happens at county council, if you get enough signatures on a petition, you can present that petition to council. And if you hit another threshold, you can get a debate at council. I'm not sure what the case is at Huntingdonshire District Council, but a group called Pause the Plan, which is being Houghton and Witton Parish Council are part of it, but various other backers are asking HDC to stop the local plan and reconsider it because of development around Houghton and Witton. David, did you have a view on this?
I have many views. So the local plan is an important piece of the planning infrastructure. It doesn't do everything, but it sets out where, you know, a lot of the policies that go on. It doesn't say you must build this here, but it's saying we need this many houses, these are the rules of the game, and so on. It's not meant to set out where roads go. Now that may be a problem with the structure, but you know, is that some of the things that the claims made in the Pause the Plan documentation, I think, are actually kind of eye-watering. So there's one which is saying that it might introduce rationing of water to 90 litres per person per day. That is, I think, a load of nonsense. There is something in the local plan, or the draft, which is a target for new houses to be designed to a water efficiency standard of 90 litres per person per day.
And it's very common.
Yeah, it is. And actually, Huntingdon Town Council wanted a tighter restriction. I think we actually went for 85 because we're in a water-stressed area. And so that's things like having more, you know, harvesting rainwater, reusing grey water, more efficient caps and so on, so that there's that. The other one that's annoyed me. There are three things. Is some of the maps that they've used. I think are they have implied with their maps that an entire area that is given as an allocation will be completely built on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just nonsense. There's one in particular where which is, it's a little bit difficult for Martin to talk about this, I think, but it's Lodge Farm, or over there for me. The developable area is less than 50% of the allocation, and it's been in the map shows it as being going all the way to Witton. Particularly annoys me because there was I don't know if this is directly as a result of something that Huntingdon Town Council asked for, but we expressed a concern about urban sprawl and Huntingdon growing into other places. And there, in the draft plan, there's a specific thing about there being a gap of 1 kilometre between developments. One of the developments, the coastal development at Witton and Lodge Farm. So there would be open space there. And it just shows, what's in the map is just, and this happens with other areas as well. Just doesn't represent reality. The final thing is we're at the moment. So the government sets targets for how many houses you have to build. If you don't meet that in your plan, you go into something called tilted balance, which basically means it's easier for developers to put stuff up, crudely. The objections coming from Houghton and Witton are about uncontrolled development and urban sprawl and so on. Pausing the local plan means we stay in tilted balance for longer. I've never had a good answer to that question. I really struggle with this petition because
they tried to make some sort of roundhouse argument that actually pausing the plan would help us out of tilted balance quicker, but I didn't really understand that.
I think the point they made was that if you didn't pause the plan, that the council, the plan might fail, and therefore you would be in tilted balance for long. I think that's the point they made. I don't particularly buy it. There was a couple of things in there that I thought were interesting. Obviously, the petition didn't get to the level within Huntingdonshire's framework where it gets a debate amongst councillors, and so it was presented. Questions were asked, and then the cabinet member, happened to be Tom Sanderson, gave a response. And if they'd got above a certain level, then there would have been a full debate at council. And part of what the pause the plan group said was, well, this petition deserved to get a lot more signatures because we did a lot of work. We went out to 11 parishes, I think what they said, and we were regularly giving out leaflets at St Ives Farmers Market. And
the leaflets are everywhere. They're in different venues as well. So it's quite spread out.
I mean, to me, and I to a certain extent, I take my hat off to them for caring about something and trying to do something about it. But there's a reality where you have to sit and look at the fact that if you didn't get enough signatures and you really, really, really tried for it, maybe it is that most people didn't really buy into the argument.
Yeah, and so Lara also asked so we had the opportunity to ask questions of the petitioners, although not debate it. Lara asked a question about how many of the signatures on the petition came from residents of Huntingdonshire, which put them on the back foot a bit, because I'd heard, and I haven't looked into it myself, that lots of those signatures in that petition are from outside of Huntingdonshire and outside of the area as well, that's the trouble with digital petitions, isn't it? Unless you check them very carefully, it's very easy to influence them. And so the fact that they didn't get enough signatures, the response was the majority of signatures were locally. But I don't think that's a very convincing argument either.
Where I've been involved in petitions before, when they verified the numbers on the petition, the councils have verified the numbers. They've literally gone through who the petitioners are and looked at who the petitioners are, so they could validate that they come from the local area.
Yeah, maybe that happened here, maybe it didn't. I don't think that. I think
it's a lot of work, though. By the way,
it is, and it's a lot of officer time as well. So maybe it did, and maybe it didn't. But I don't think our constitution isn't very robust, honestly.
No. Well, to a certain extent, though, it doesn't matter, does it? You know, they got their moment in the sun. They got a point. They got the opportunity to make the point across, and it wasn't something that was going to make a material difference at the council, and there was no sort of meaningful debate. So it was probably in the right category, is what I would say.
No, I agree. One of the points they made was, I think they tried to make the point that the urban sprawl from Alconbury is somehow going to intercept the urban sprawl from St Neots. Like, to me, having driven up and down to Alconbury sometimes, several times a week for county council, Alconbury's quite a long way from St Neots. Yeah, it's not something you could ever walk or even try and bike. And so I can't imagine that's ever going to happen. So I didn't find some of their arguments.
Can I just add in one thing, which is I think the basic issue they're getting at there's no clear boundary now really between St Ives and Houghton and Witham. They sort of seem to run into each other. I actually share the concern. I think that's legitimate. It's something that, for Huntingdon Town Council, we raised quite a lot, and we'll continue to do so, I hope. I think that is that idea of maintaining the sort of identity of places as discrete units matters. But I don't know. I really struggle with the position. I get the concern about it, but I think some of the stuff that they were coming out with I really struggle with.
I mean, that issue is a very, very common issue in planning, and I deal with it a lot in the consultation that I do across the country, basically. And I have to say, within Whittlesea, there is big concern that if we do become part of Peterborough, that the gap between Whittlesea and Peterborough will disappear over a number of years. And so I do buy the issue. But it's also true that does happen in places as well, and has happened legitimately. I mean, you look at how London has grown over the years, and that's happened in London.
But we touched on it earlier as well. We're talking about, Tempsford. There is the very real possibility, which I think will happen, that we're going to get all the way from maybe Buckton through Little Paxton, St Neots, Great Barford, Tempsford to Sandy will just be one huge conurbation, which might even span 3 different local authorities. And that situation is outside of almost anybody's control, almost outside of the planning system's control, because it's across different local authorities. And so we all get it, and we all live part of it. Part of it is a consequence of living in one of the most economically prosperous parts of the country, even though it might not feel like it sometimes, is that people want to live here. Government is strategically wants to build houses here. They set really high targets for Huntingdonshire District Council, which is why we're in tilted balance. And these are the solutions, that's the way it goes. And also, I think we all agree there is a housing crisis in this country. We need more homes for local people. And so the only way you get those is by building houses. So,
and we were talking earlier about young people, the problems that young people are facing. Well, one of the big ones is housing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's the number of people that that they can't even get on a ladder to rent because rents are so high as well. And when you think, I bought a house way back when, 1986, I think I bought my house, and we bought that on 3.5 times salary. Can you imagine doing that now at my age? At that age, I was 22, I think, buying a house at 22 at 3.5 times salary.
No, it's impossible.
Yeah, it's not possible. But the issue is all the barriers before getting on the ladder, because the truth is I pay less per month in my mortgage than I paid in rent in the similar area, and definitely less than I paid in Cambridge for like a property like probably three times smaller. However, it is getting deposit and actually getting someone to provide the loan, especially if you're not in a standard 9 to 5 like secure job. And it was like a nightmare, like, you know, if you're self-employed and having counselor income and having like different sources of income, to actually have any lender like actually give you the chance to have the mortgage is like a nightmare. I've tried like probably like a whole year and actually got a building society, but like that's a lot of young people are not in the standard 9 to 5 secure permanent contract, and that's what blocks them from actually getting a mortgage, because they are considered too risky as well.
If you look at it, you know, if you look at it, you know, that issue, if you're paying a huge portion of your salary out in rent, how are you expected to, at the same time, to save for it? It's really, really difficult. And my daughter was in the same situation. You know, she's living in London with a partner, working in London, and you know, paying huge rent in a place basically out Crystal Palace way. And you know, they sat there and thought, there's no way we're ever getting on the housing ladder by living where we live. And they moved out to Sheffield and bought a house, you know, in order to do it. And you know, to a certain extent, some of that has always gone on, but you know, it's so much worse nowadays, and it's something people have to understand about the housing industry, you know, and the reason why we need more houses. And you know, you talk about concreting over the countryside and all this stuff, but there's a reality, which is we do have loads and loads of countryside. We do have a farming industry that has the ability to make farming much more productive. And even Farmers Weekly talks about massive increases in crop yields over the next 10 to 20 years, which would mean that we'd have enough time to spend to create more crops to feed the population and everything else, whilst also having capacity to build houses and to do things like solar.
That argument does my head in sometimes, because it always comes up that, oh, we're going to concrete the whole of Huntingdonshire. So on Cabinet, we had a special local plan briefing. We got a big map of the whole of Huntingdonshire, put all the existing developments on it, all the new proposed local plan developments. And yes, around St Neots and St Ives and Huntingdon, there are lots of developments. But across the district, it's overwhelmingly rural, yeah? In lots of places, you can almost not see the development because of all the rural farmland. So
I think the figure is that it's about 6% of our country that's basically concreted over. And you know, if we went up to 8, 9, 10%, we'd meet every single housing demand we're ever going to need, and would be able to build solar. And at the same time, our farms would become much more productive, and crop yields would go up, and so we'd create more food to feed the population as well. I mean, that's a reality. And the thing about crop yields is some of it is about different types of plants and developing plants that, you know, as an example, thrive better on with less water. Some of it is about using AI and stuff like that, so that you're planting crops more densely in areas that get more sun or get more water and stuff like that, so that, you know, even across a single field, you're planting more density in one part of a field than another, because it can cope with more density. And it's those sorts of things that, you know, that they're talking about. And you know, we get the argument about concreting over the countryside, and it when you dig down into it, it doesn't wash.
Can I bring up Martin Lucas-Smith's comment? And this is an interesting one, because obviously London is hugely important to the you know, the country's economy and so on. But I think this is true. I mean, I think it is now starting. You know, is now improving. I used to have to get the train reasonably often from York to Manchester, and that journey over the Pennines by train was bloody awful on this sort of, you know, crapped out super sprinter. I don't think it was a super sprinter, but you know what I mean, one of the pacer rather. And it's not actually that far, or like, it went via Leeds. From Leeds to Manchester isn't that far, and you think that would be a useful connection to have.
Yeah, if you read Andy Burnham's book that he did with Steve Rotherham, Head North, he talks about this in there, and part of the issue is, and I absolutely buy this, is the way the government's Green Book is written, which in effect what it looks at is short-term economic benefit effectively as the reason and justification for investing in infrastructure. And what that means is you are in effect loading infrastructure on places that are already growing, and it means you don't have the capacity to invest in areas where a bit of investment would actually kickstart capacity to grow. And it's he talks about it particularly in the light of obviously the Manchester and Liverpool, or that book does, but you could take the same argument and weigh it around Cambridgeshire in the east of England as an example, with Ely North Junction, and so many other areas. And it's a really, really interesting piece of thought, because people fight against infrastructure around Cambridgeshire at the moment, and there are areas of the country that would absolutely welcome it, that can't get the investment.
Yeah.
A rare positive comment about.
Sorry, I've got to go in and buy this. The levelling up agenda was a con, and I know this, and I realised levelling up was lovely and the principles in it, because in theory, if levelling up had worked, it would have been fantastic one nationism, but it wasn't. It was a way of throwing money out at places to pretend that there was activity, which government is bloody great at. I had a friend of mine who wrote some bids for councils for levelling up funding, and I said, how will they get on? And he said, oh, they'll all get funding and they won't make a jot of difference.
On that, shall we haven't talked
depressing note.
On that depressing note, we haven't talked about data poverty. Maybe we can talk about it next year, because anybody's watching.
Yeah, let's do committees next week, because we have Highways Committee coming up on this Tuesday, so we can do like a kind of a county council committee news, because there'll be some good news hopefully from the Highways Committee.
Thanks for somebody putting that up. It's worth saying it. I think you probably were making that point, Martin. I just sort of leapt in a little bit, so apologies if I did.
Right, so thank you very much. We're going to blame the audience for taking us over by nearly half an hour by keep putting bloody comments and make us talk about things which were never on the agenda. So sorry for the crap chairmanship and the fact we never got onto things we said we talk about, but that's part of what's wonderful about Sunday nights doing this podcast. So thank you very much for all your interactions. And we're going to see you next. We do it at 6:30 every week now, only 6:30 is the time. So see you 6:30.
We only do 6:30 because I want to watch Arsenal at 4:30. So if we're not playing at 4:30, we might end up at 6.
All right, good. All right, thank you very much, everyone, and see you next week, depending on Martin's football schedule. See you later.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.